A very good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today at The Ambassador, where we debunk global diplomacy and geopolitics. I am your ambassador, Susan Nganga. But first, to our top story today, former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte was arrested today at Manila's International Airport following an order from the International Criminal Court. Duterte is under investigations for crimes against humanity related to his controversial war on drugs. Police apprehended him upon his arrival from Hong Kong and as part of the ongoing ICC probe into alleged extrajudicial killings during his presidency. Here's more on that scene.
Former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte has been taken into custody after arriving at Manila's International Airport following an order from the International Criminal Court. Duterte faces accusations of crimes against humanity stemming from his violent war on drugs, which has resulted in thousands of deaths. According to sources, police arrested the former leader as he landed from Hong Kong, acting on the ICC's directive to hold him for investigation. The arrest marks a significant step in the ongoing probe into alleged extrajudicial killings that occurred during Duterte's presidency, a policy that has sparked widespread controversy both in the Philippines and internationally. The ICC launched its investigation into Duterte's anti-drug campaign in 2018, citing widespread allegations of unlawful killings by law enforcement and vigilante groups. Duterte, who served as president from 2016 to 2022, has long defended the campaign as necessary to fight crime, but human rights groups have condemned it as a violation of international law. The arrest is a critical development in the pursuit of justice for thousands of victims of the war on drugs. As legal proceedings unfold, it signals that the ICC is intensifying efforts to hold high-ranking officials accountable for human rights violations. Reporting for GBS News, Irene Juguna.
A major maritime collision occurred in the North Sea of East Yorkshire, involving two vessels, the Stena Immaculate, a United States-flagged oil tanker, and the Portuguese-flagged cargo ship Solong. The crash caused a massive fire on both ships, with one crew member still missing and 32 others rescued. As the fire continues, authorities are assessing the environmental damage from the release of hazardous cargo into the sea. Here's more on that scene.
Solong has collided with tanker Stena Immaculate in the outer anchorage. Both vessels are abandoning.
Two vessels, the Stena Immaculate, a US-flagged oil tanker, and the Portuguese-flagged cargo ship Solong collided in the North Sea. The Stena Immaculate, carrying jet fuel, was struck by the Solong while anchored, causing a rupture in its cargo tank and a subsequent fire. The collision led to the fire remaining active into the late evening, although 36 crew members were rescued, while one crew member from the Solong remains missing, with the search now called off. The environment impact of the collision is still being assessed. The Stena Immaculate released jet fuel into the sea, which is toxic to marine life. However, some of the fuel has already burned off due to the fire. Meanwhile, the Solong was transporting 15 containers of sodium cyanide, a toxic chemical that could be harmful to marine life if released into the water. Experts are concerned about potential hydrogen cyanide gas exposure, which could pose additional risks to those involved in the rescue operations. The collision's cause remains unclear, although tracking data suggests the Stena Immaculate was nearly stationary when the Solong, traveling at a speed of 16 knots, struck it. Both vessels sustained significant damage from the impact and the ongoing fires, and investigation into the cause of the crash are continuing. Chiza Tiengo, GBS News.
Asian stock markets experienced significant declines on Tuesday, extending a global sell-off driven by mounting concerns that an expensive trade war could hamper United States' economic growth and potentially lead to a recession. This apprehension among investors has led to a flight towards a safe haven assets, notably the Japanese yen. Here's more on that.
Asian stock markets tumbled on Tuesday as escalating trade tensions fueled fears of U.S. economic slowdown, triggering a global sell-off.
Uncertainty around tariffs and what the impact may have on inflation and just the general economic outlook. And then two, there's a bit of a growth scare that's going on at the same time. And so those two things, compounded by consumer sentiment, which is just really bad right now, those things are adding up to this, moment of volatility in the market.
Investors rushed to safe haven assets like the Japanese yen, while major indices across Asia and Wall Street face sharp declines. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 index fell sharply, reaching its lowest point since September, reflecting heightened investor anxiety. Similarly, Taiwan stock market mirrored this downturn, also hitting lows not seen since September. Australia main index declined to a 7-month low, while markets in China and Hong Kong registered substantial losses. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq Composite both experienced significant drops, intensifying fears of broader economic slowdown. Currency markets have also felt the impact, with the safe haven currencies like the Japanese yen and Swiss franc appreciating, while the United States dollar has weakened. Paris Kigo, GBS News.
Thank you, Paris, for that detailed report. Now, that international news brings us to a very fast break. We'll be right back with even more.
Hello, kids. Did you know a year has 31,557,600 seconds? Why do you think so? Exactly. There are 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day, and 365 and 25 days in a year. We count the extra 0.25 because of leap years. When you multiply all these numbers together, you get a huge number of seconds. That's why a year feels long, but time still flies when you are having fun.
What is always before you but can't be seen?
Kudiscover talent.
Kudiscover. Ulijuangaje like unaweza imba like
Kini Trace Jumi Kipchoge kwa ngoma na mfala wananidis na wanabonga kwa ngoma, mafanjo wananipenda ndo nazidi kwa roga, wenye walenjaribu manze walishachoka na nikozabe meditation naendelesha generation niliofanya kalki.
Wewe at 1 year old ulikuwa unafanya nini? You're feeling the vibe. Ulitoa a few days ago, unaweza taka utuambie like ulikuwa unafikiria nini when you came up with the lyrics?
So I'm doing my thing. Don't try and stop me when I'm doing my thing. I'm tryna boss, let me do my thing. And if you're tryna win, you can be on my team. So I'm doing my thing. Don't try and stop me when I'm doing my thing. I'm tryna boss, let me do my thing.
You feel like you're young at heart, I'm an old soul. If you could only listen to one singer or band for the rest of your life, who will you choose?
And the question of the day is, can you survive without internet?
Ngumu. Plus kwa chile hizo story tu zote zikupite ni ngori. Niwaambie ukweli. Like hii ni kama kuambia mtu mwenye anafanya zoea kushindana na nguo, mwambie toa nguo hiyo. Hiyo mtu aniriki sasa. Like ile ndio ya kichwa kabisa.
Sasa hivi naweza kahalia bila simu.
Kuspendeliza kwa simu. So,
Water remains to be the world's most precious commodity, but is the most misused. In times of drought, saving water is the only solution to making sure you have it. Don't use the shower when water is scarce. Instead, use the basin while bathing. Repair all leaking taps and pipes. Wash your car only whenever necessary. If not, use a piece of cloth to wipe it clean. Do not use the hose pipe to water your garden. Instead, use the water you clean your vegetable with to water your flowers. Do not release wastewater into rivers. Note that your downstream is someone else's upstream. Of all the waters available on Earth, only 1% is fit for human consumption. Every drop counts.
Everywhere, GBS.
Welcome back to the bulletin now. World leaders and advocates gathered at the 69th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, chaired by Saudi Arabia, to take stock of progress made and the growing challenges in the fight for gender inequality. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres issued a stark warning, saying the hard-won gains for women's rights are under siege and the patriarchy is making a dangerous return. Here's more on that report.
The 69th session of the Commission on the Status of Women convened, bringing together world leaders and advocates to address the urgent challenges facing women globally. This meeting comes at a critical time as setbacks in reproductive rights, economic equality, and legal protections for women are becoming more pronounced. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned that the global fight for women's rights is facing significant setbacks.
Women's rights are under siege. The poison of patriarchy is back, and is back with a vengeance.
He also pointed out the alarming rise of digital threats, with up to 95% of online deepfakes being non-consensual pornographic images and 90% of them depicting women.
Up to 95% of all online deepfakes are non-consensual pornographic images, and 90% depict women. And unequal access to technologies inflames existing inequalities.
This session follows UN Secretary General Guterres' recent International Women's Day address on March 7, where he launched the Gender Equality Clarion Call, a bold and urgent pledge to defend and advance the rights of all women and girls.
Reproductive rights are under attack and equality initiatives discarded. In Afghanistan, women and girls have been stripped of their most basic rights, forbidden even from raising their voices in public.
As discussions unfold, the session has brought renewed focus on the critical need for global solidarity and commitment to achieving gender equality, reminding leaders that the clock is ticking for women's rights worldwide. Reporting for GBS News, Irene Juguna.
Thank you, Irene, for that report. Now, on today's fact-checking segment, we explore the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and the West Bank, which has reached catastrophic levels with over 47,000 deaths in Gaza, 90% of its population displaced multiple times, and systematic destruction of infrastructure, crippling access to food, healthcare, and basic services. The fragile January 2025 ceasefire collapsed amid mutual violations, leaving 1.9 million Gazans trapped in what UNRWA calls a battlefield for humanitarian work. But before we usher in our guest, let's look at a report prepared by our correspondent Abdi Hamid Ali.
On 7th of October 2023, Hamas conducted an unprecedented attack on Israel, which resulted in the death of 1,200 Israelis and the kidnapping of 251 people. Israel took a wrathful measure by indiscriminately targeting civilians using airstrikes, quadcopters, and snipers. Over 47,000 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed by Israel, 70% of them being women and children. Activists described the military operation in the enclave as genocide. The ICC issued an arrest warrants to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant for war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant bear criminal responsibility for the following international crimes committed on the territory of the State of Palestine from at least the 8th of October 2023. The crimes include starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, willfully causing great suffering, serious injury to body or health or cruel treatment, willful killing or murder, and intentionally directing attacks against a civilian population, as well as crimes against humanity of extermination and or murder.
The ceasefire in Gaza was enforced on January 19th, which was divided into 3 phases. The first phase involves the release of 33 Israeli hostages in exchange of Palestinian prisoners, allowing aid to enter inside the enclave and partial withdrawal of the Israeli military. The second phase involves the release of all hostages and full withdrawal of the Israeli military. The third phase involves the release of deceased Israeli hostages and the reconstruction of Gaza. The first phase was successful, however, the second phase never took any effect as Israel is blaming Hamas of violating ceasefire by stealing aid material to utilize as a means of attacking Israel. Trump made a controversial proposal of annexing Gaza and displacing Palestinians from Gaza to Egypt and Jordan and turn it into a Riviera.
I don't want to be cute, I don't want to be a wise guy, but the Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad, this could be so magnificent.
Trump even shared an AI video of Gaza being turned into a resort destination. The video received global backlash. Rights groups have called the proposed displacement of Palestinians as a form of ethnic cleansing. The West Bank has seen an increase in violence by settlers and the military ever since the first phase of the ceasefire took place. Buildings are being destroyed. Settlers are also attacking Palestinian villages, and the military blocks farmers from harvesting olives, a symbol of Palestinian nativity in the occupied land. This is Abdi Hamid Ali, GBS News.
To debunk more on that issue, we invited our correspondent Abdi Hamid Ali and one of our guests currently in Oman. I'll give them a second to introduce themselves. Abdi, welcome so much to the bulletin. Kindly introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Yes.
My name is Abdi Hamid Ali. I'm a correspondent. I'm a Middle Eastern and Asian correspondent specialized in reporting about the wars in Gaza, the situation in Lebanon and Syria as well.
Thank you so much. Now I'll give this opportunity to our other guest, Dr. Naib, currently in Oman. Dr. Naib, thank you. Welcome to the bulletin. Kindly introduce yourself.
I'm a Dubai-based lecturer. I'm currently in Muscat, lecturing over here, international relations, history. I'm also a regular writer and essayist, published works in many different fields, and I'm glad to be here. I think it's an important topic to discuss, and definitely one that we all need to be a part of, definitely.
We hope
Thank
we
you for
have a
having me.
nice discussion. Okay.
Definitely,
Yes.
definitely.
So, Doctor, as you know, the ceasefire is divided into 3 stages. During the first phase of the ceasefire, there are multiple cases where Israel and Hamas both accused each other of violating the ceasefire terms. Israel and Hamas so have moved forward with the second phase that was supposed to start last week. What were the main issues that affected the ceasefire, Dr.
I mean, to start off, I mean, aside from the fact that the war in itself is too catastrophic, and it's a never-ending war that's been. I mean, one thing we tend to forget is the historical dimension of this specific conflict. This is not something that just begun a couple of years ago or since October 7th. This is something that's been ongoing for more than half a century right now. So to me, it's not necessarily just the ceasefires. So the ceasefires and the lack of finding a consensus on the ceasefire is not something totally, it's a perennial constant within this specific conflict. It's something that's always been happening. I think for me specifically, this specific ceasefire, what's been occurring recently, there's not only been a global shift in balance of power, there's also been a lot of drastic regional changes. I mean, not only what's happened in Syria, but what's going on in Iran, what happened in Iran, the developments the last year or so, Lebanon as well. Gaza has been destroyed and it's been flattened the past year, essentially. And even the resistance in Iraq or any other elements of the resistance is no longer there. So there's a lot of, and then there's the Trump presidency, and there's a new global shift in power. There are the changes in Russia. So all of these changes, I think, do affect the ceasefire. It's a zero-sum game right now. I think we are realizing that history was paused for a while. As Fukuyama said, history ended. It didn't really end. It was paused. We were in a unipolar order. We're shifting towards a multipolar one. And I think all of these specific changes do take shape eventually in these ceasefire agreements or attempted agreements. I don't think any of these would be successful either way.
Thank you so much, Professor. As you know, during the start of the first phase of the ceasefire, the Israeli military conducted a military operation in the West Bank. What do you think is the reason behind the military operation, considering the fact that the Palestinian Authority, the legitimate government of Palestine, and the international recognized government presides in the West Bank?
See, one thing about Israel in terms of political characteristics as a state is its expansionist nature. This is something we take for granted, something that I think people don't take seriously enough nowadays. Maybe it's due to the fact of the facade of a democratic system or form of governance that the state of Israel has or possesses to a degree that allows people to assume that they are like other states around the world, not necessarily expansionist. But in essence, Arabs do have an experience with this specific state for years now. As I said, it's been more than half a century dealing with the state of Israel. And one perennial characteristic, one theme that's been ongoing for a while is the expansionist nature of the state. It's now it's been more than half a century as well, since 1967. And that was when Israel expanded to a degree that it possessed a lot of lands within current-day Sinai Peninsula, parts of Lebanon to a degree, parts of the Golan Heights. I mean, we tend to forget the fact that as we speak, Israel has lands within southern Lebanon under its possession. Israel is expanding within Syria beyond the Golan Heights borderlines. Israel is even discussing the potential possibility of a demilitarized zone within the Suwaida regions of southern Syria. So, I mean, it's a breach to another country's sovereignty, but that's the thing about Israel. It does not care about such sovereignties of states. The same goes for the Palestinian government in the West Bank. And it does not matter. And as I said, the current changes within the global state of affairs of international politics, the current shifts are leading to an environment where it's a zero-sum game. It's all based on power politics. And if you don't have power, you're not seen as a sovereign actor. And if you're not seen as a sovereign actor, no one's going to take you seriously. As Professor Dugin recently said, what are you going to do about it? You know, Israel is going to take the West Bank, and what are the Arabs going to do about it? That's what the Dugin said. And he was speaking about this, he used this term, or the saying rhetorically, as in, he's trying to reveal the fact that it's all based on power, the current dynamics of international politics. And if you don't have it, you will lose. And it's simple as that. And hence why I think Hamas is going to be resisting until the last moment. And nothing's going to stop this bloody onslaught from Israel. And nothing's going to stop the resistance from attempting to stop this. I guess violence breeds violence, and it's going to keep on leading to more catastrophic situations.
To add more on that, do you think Hamas is a resistance organization and not a terrorist organization?
There's one thing I actually try to avoid nowadays. There's one thing that I've noticed is specific questions that are being asked concerning this specific situation that have two specific issues for me. This is one of the questions, and there's another type of question which is usually concerning, the events of October 7th and so on that led to the beginning of the current conflict and the current situation in Gaza. I think they're loaded questions, and that's the problem I have with such questions. And the second is the fact that they're very misleading questions. I mean, the very basic situation here, the main issue here, I think, for most individuals, not necessarily politically involved with Hamas, nor with Israel, and just are basic humans. I mean, looking at this and watching this unfold on the news, the basic issue that they have is the human catastrophe going on, and how do you stop that from occurring? And so hence why I think asking any specific individual whether it's, so again, it's all relative to me. As a person who is an expert in Oswald Spengler's philosophy of history and, specific relativist German philosophers of culture and history, everything is relative. One person's terrorist organization is another person's liberating organization. It's all relative. I mean, Nelson Mandela was a liberator for many in Africa, but for others, other groups in Africa, it was seen as a terrorist organization. Same goes for other freedom fighters around the world. Same goes for Ho Chi Minh. Same goes for Castro and Che Guevara. It depends. It's all relative on who you ask. But so I think these are loaded questions and maybe misleading in terms of our discussion. To me, it's relative. It depends on who you ask. If you can ask Trump, maybe after negotiations, and if they go well, and which they've been having away from Israel, which is quite a shocking insight, to be honest, in Qatar, apparently. So if that occurs and it goes well, and they actually do have a deal, the Trump administration, Hamas, maybe they will be taken off the list. And that's relativity to you. I think in a realist environment, an international political environment based on realism and violence, and so essentially what we're seeing today develop around the world, it reveals to you this relativism. One day Trump, the US under Biden is supporting Zelensky, vehemently supporting him, and without any shadow of a doubt, pledging full support for Ukraine. But on the other hand, you get Trump, and things unravel and things change quite quick. And this is what I like about the current shift around the world in terms of international politics. Yes, it's violent. Yes, it's dangerous. This is what we're going to be heading through. It's a very turbulent international environment. However, it's one that's revealing the truth in many of the implicit ideas of many different states or individuals are going to be made explicit nowadays. And this is, I think, what I like about what's coming, and despite the violence and what it brings about as well.
During the 15-month assault in Gaza, what are the reasons that led to the arrest of Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant to receive an arrest warrant by the International Criminal Court of Justice?
I mean, I think it's what we discussed and what you discussed in the news section today. It's essentially the human catastrophe that occurred in Gaza. Definitely, there is no doubt about that. It's a human catastrophe. I think it's around 50,000 casualties at this point, and with a huge disparity. And that's the situation. This is why I think many are quite disturbed about the current situation in Gaza because of the disparity in casualties, and hence why there is a push towards a support for Palestine. There's a large support for the Palestinian cause right now, large support for awareness on the specific issue specifically, and pointing fingers towards Israel because of the disparity. And again, I'm not saying that the casualties in Israel are irrelevant, not at all, but there's a huge disparity here, and this is a reflection of the disparity in military power. And this is one thing that maybe the optimists on the Arab side should maybe take into consideration initially, or should have taken into consideration during the beginning of the specific war. Many people are optimistic about this specific war. Many people are optimistic about the resistance, but not knowing the fact that Israel is one of the strongest militaries in the region and being supported by one of the strongest militaries in the world and history. So there is no doubt that, of course, Israel would have won this, and they did. Definitely, they flattened Gaza, and this is just normal. This is basic. This is what would have happened, clearly. Now, the point is, it led to a human catastrophe, led to a quasi-genocide, you could say. And it's a straight-up genocide. And all of this specific crises we see in Gaza, the catastrophe, the genocide, technically. All of this, of course, would lead to specific intergovernmental organizations getting involved. You guys mentioned Duterte getting potentially arrested for his specific his violence and his his war against drugs in the Philippines. I mean, that's an example of how the ICC would get involved in specific countries. Now, the thing is, I think what matters is, is anything going to actually happen? And this is where we go back to the current state of affairs of international politics, the current shift that we're going through. It's no longer a unipolar order when there is one specific power, and a liberal one at that could support these intergovernmental organizations in upholding these liberal ideals. It's no longer that. It's power politics. And if the ICC has the power to arrest these two individuals, it would do so, but it doesn't. And then that's the tragedy of our situation right now. They do deserve to be condemned. They do deserve to be taken to court. But are they going to be taken to court? Even the U.S., I think, rejected such calls, and were critiquing the ICC recently. So, they should be taken to court. They should be claimed responsible for this genocide that occurred. But is it going to happen? And that's the question that should be asked.
Thank you, Doctor, for your in-depth analysis of the human catastrophe in Gaza. I just want to ask you, recently the Israeli government have halted aid in entering the Gaza Strip. And as you know, during the holy month of Ramadan, Palestinians require food and also shelter to receive during. What do you think about the Israeli government halting aid in Gaza? Do you think it's a method used as a weapon of war?
Yeah, we just mentioned how this is a form of ethnic cleansing in a sense, which is maybe implicit and is not too explicit, but I think now as time moves on, it's being made more explicit and more clear as we are watching the events unfold. But as we said, it's a form of ethnic cleansing, and I think these specific types of actions reflect that even more. I don't think anyone is shocked in the Arab world or around the world of these specific actions from Netanyahu. Maybe initially within the West, seeing the specific, the shrewd and crude nature of Israeli foreign policy against Gaza shocked many people. But I think now people have gotten used. This is ethnic cleansing, and this is how it's done. As you said, it's the holy month of Ramadan. We're fasting. I'm fasting as we speak, and many are. And everyone in Gaza has a majority population of Muslims, and they're definitely fasting. And I think it's intentional to use this specific month as well. And then they're not only weaponizing, as you said, aid, they're also weaponizing and going against our specific faith, you could say. It's turned into a religious war. And this is one thing maybe I want to highlight briefly now, maybe more later on, is the fact that people tend to forget the eschatological dimension of the events and the developments in Gaza or Palestine as a whole. That whole region, I think the events unfolding have an eschatological dimensions to them. The policies of the far right in Israel, specifically the religious far right groups, they have a huge eschatological dimension to them. They're all shaped by eschatology. These are religious groups. And yes, even Hamas would be considered a religious group, and they do acknowledge the eschatological dimension of the current event. And they do mention it. Now, a lot of news channels don't mention this and do forget this. And that's what I like about Professor Dugan recently, highlighting this specific point, that there is an eschatological dimension to this, that there is a very existential dimension to this, to the whole world. And this is being weaponized by specific groups, and it's being believed by other groups. But yes, in terms of Netanyahu's recent attack on Gaza through weaponizing aid, yeah, definitely. I think it's just a reflection of ethnic cleansing, as you said, and it's tragic. One of the many tragedies that have been unfolding in Gaza for the past couple of years.
Speaking in regards to existential relations in Gaza, what do you think about Trump's proposal about displacing the Palestinians from Gaza to Egypt and Jordan? Do you think that it can come to fruition, the plan?
I think in terms of this specific issue, I think, again, I'll go back to what Alexander Dugin recently said in an interview with Al Sharq News, if I'm not mistaken. And what he said is, again, borrowing this proverb or saying from Russian, and which goes like, what are you going to do about it? You know, it just reveals the power dynamics in any situation, you know. I'll take your food, what are you going to do about it? And if you're not as powerful as me, you can't do anything about it. It's a form of realism in a sense. And I like that saying, because it really reveals, and he was as confused as I was about the situation of the Middle East as a civilization or as a bloc within a multipolar order, because it's quite dysfunctional. And I think it's the most dysfunctional around the world as we speak, and I think we can talk about it, about this a lot. Now, he said, Trump's going to take Gaza. What are the Arabs going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? They can't do anything about it. And that's the thing. That is the thing. Many are optimistic about the current talks by other Arab states and how they are rejecting the specific proposal, but it does not matter. It's all about, again, it's power dynamics. It's all about who holds the specific powers that could lead to the materialization of their own political goals. And I think Trump can do this along with the help of Israel. They both can do this, and they will do this. Now, the question is, again, what are the Arabs going to do about it? That is the question. I think this could actually come to fruition. I'm not going to comment much on his sayings and his recent talks about considering annexing the Greenland or Canada, but maybe similar things could occur there. I mean, it's only a matter of time to see how this is going to unfold, or whether, you know, he's going to take this actually seriously or not. But in terms of Gaza, I think that's definitely possible. Definitely. With the help of Israel, it's definitely possible. And it's the question, again, lies in whether the Arab states are willing to do something about this or not. And I don't think they are, unfortunately. I'll say one thing concerning this. Cultures and blocks, civilizational blocks, could be seen as having immune systems like organisms. And we're witnessing a multipolar order emerge. We're seeing Russia emerging today. We're seeing an African bloc emerging, and maybe different sub-African spheres, subcultural spheres within Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, and West Africa, maybe even the South. And of course, India and China, these are all rising blocs. And the most dysfunctional out of these blocs is clearly the Middle East. Hence why these destabilizing wars and conflicts are reoccurring within the specific region. Now, to understand this, and maybe I'll get back to this later on, to understand the how extreme the situation is in the Middle East specifically, is when we see how a culture's normal reaction to such destabilizing forces, such as the war of Israel against Gaza and the Western adventurism in the Levant and Iraq and Libya and Yemen and so on. To understand, a normal reaction is usually to react like an immune system. There should be. So the only functioning immune system today in maybe the Middle East, and whether one supports them or not, is the Houthis function as an immune system to this cultural bloc of the Arab Islamic world, or the Arab Judeo-Christian Islamic world. So they're functioning as that immune system. It's seeing an alien ontological threat, and it's reacting to it. Putin reacted successfully, and he reflected to us a very successful and very powerful, or maybe strong immune system. I wouldn't say successful is the right term, but maybe powerful immune system. You know, NATO tried to try the specific incursions towards Ukraine, and they reacted, and you have the military operation going on right now in Ukraine. Africa has a healthy immune system. They demonstrated that recently. East Africa, through the economic growth over there and its unique economic paths. Central Africa specifically demonstrated this perfectly, I think, through the military and political resistance to Western hegemony the past year, which is very impressive. You have West Africa maybe politically asserting itself once more again as a unique player. And these are all indicators of a healthy immune system. Now, none of this is existent in the Arab world. And this is what we should keep in mind. And this is what I call a cultural immune system disorder. And hence why anything is possible here by any outer players, external players, because nothing's happening inside, apart from the Houthis maybe disrupting the trade routes in the Red Sea, which is kind of beneficial, but in a sense, in a world where big players, so these big civilizational blocks, such as Brazil, China, India, so the BRICS nations essentially, are playing a role. A small non-state actor like the Houthis won't really make a difference. They might to a degree, but not to a large extent.
Doctor, from what you have said is that Arabian countries are not currently doing anything. Why do you think so, Doctor? Because I guess people must demonstrate. Like, I'm not seeing much action going on in Gaza about their displacement. Why do you think so, Doctor?
So again, as I mentioned now, what I describe this, in my writings mainly, I describe this as a cultural immune system disorder. And what do I mean by cultural immune system disorder in the Arab world? So what is it, if we actually define a cultural immune system disorder or dysfunction, it's an organism possessing an immune system which is either overactive, and it's overactive to a degree that it's attacking its own body, which is the case of many groups or maybe countries in the Middle East, where they're attacking their own bodies and not realizing or making the distinction between an ontological enemy and its own healthy structures of its own body. And this is what's happening with many groups. And I won't mention any specific groups, but I think Syria and Iraq for the past 10 years are perfect demonstrations of how this could occur. Specific groups from there attacking their own bodies. And that's overactive. Sometimes it's also underactive, and I think the current talks against the Trump suggestion for Gaza and the Israeli plan, the current talks are underactive. I mean, yes, you will talk for the specific issue and situation. Now, what are these talks going to materialize in, though? In terms of political solutions. Again, in a world where it's based on power dynamics, in the world we're heading towards, hence why Trump's rhetoric sounds very rough and violent and shocking to so many people. But that's where we're heading to a degree. Hence why it's shocking to see Trump or the US supporting Ukraine for 4 years under the Biden administration. Then you see Trump coming into power, and suddenly you see very smooth ties with Putin. That could possibly settle the situation in Ukraine, and I hope it does. But the point is this is the world we're heading in today. It's one of realpolitik, as the French say. It's real politics, power politics, strongman politics. And if you don't have that in the Arab world, you won't be productive in terms of your own solutions, in terms of bargaining a power. You won't have that. I'll also say one thing. The modern nation state, Africa and the Middle East went through similar forms of colonialism, but I think Africa has gone through a way worse experience with this, and a way harsher form of colonialism than the Middle East. Yet it emerged recently as a global player in a sense. It's not a bloc yet, and that's the thing about these post-colonial lands of the Middle East and Africa on one hand. They tend to be very dominated by the modern paradigm. There is no large superpower that's functioning within the Middle East specifically, or Africa. It's not like Russia, India, and China. Colonialism took a different role in such countries where the modern paradigm of the modern nation state divided such regions to a degree, such continents or subcontinents, to a degree that there cannot exist one large global power or player. Yet Africa is still trying to assert itself, which is quite impressive. Now, in the Middle East, that didn't take hold, and it seems quite bleak. I'll just leave it at that. It seems quite bleak. It doesn't look like there is no global. So, I mean, one more point maybe I wanted to mention, maybe before ending this specific point, is the fact that it needs to function as a bloc. If the Middle East doesn't function as a large bloc, it cannot be a player in global politics, and it's going to constantly be destabilized by foreign forces and foreign powers.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Now, Hamas is blamed by the Western nation for what happened in Gaza, but many fail to understand the motivation behind the atrocities of the October 7th, as you have said earlier. Do you think Hamas is solely to be blamed for what happened on that fateful day that claimed the lives of more than 1,200 Israelis?
So, as Abdi mentioned earlier, concerning the question of whether we should label and so on specific groups, I mean, unless someone is involved politically with specific groups, in my opinion, having an experience in politics myself, or someone is involved on the other side, whether the Trump administration or the Israeli government or the Israeli military, I think only in such situations where one is politically involved to such a degree should one answer such specific questions. But I think the media chaos that occurred the past year or so due to this specific event has led to such questions becoming, again, loaded questions and very misleading to the actual what should be discussed in order to resolve the specific issue. So again, one thing about the historical context, the importance of the historical context when looking at this specific situation, is the fact that this is bound to happen. Now, it was bound to happen. Many analysts have spoken about how Hamas or any other group, for that matter, would have done so clearly in such a situation from Israeli repression. I mean, this is a result of years and years of repression. Now, we tend to forget that a lot of secular groups were functioning and active in Palestinian politics for quite a while during the Cold War, so 1960s, 70s. You have the PFLP, George Habash, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. You know, Layla Khalid's a famous figure. You have Naif Hawatma, and I was named after Naif Hawatma. He was a very big and well-known politician and hero. Now, you have many of these liberators, and these were also seen as terrorists by specific Israeli groups and by Western countries. Now, the point is, we see a shift now. Now, the theme now turns toward religious groups emerging now. This was beyond the Cold War. We see the death of modern ideological paradigms, and we see the rise of religion once more, Islamism and so on, and Islamist groups within the Middle East. So again, for this specific question is a loaded question, and it's, I think, very misleading. What I think should be considered here, what people should, I think, highlight further, is how this war is ongoing, and it's one that's led to the losses of thousands and millions of lives from both sides for more than half a century right now. And it's not only these specific two sides, but also Egypt's been involved in multiple wars. Maybe not recently, but since the 70s and 60s and 50s and the 40s as well. And same goes for Syria, same goes for Lebanon, Lebanon is always pulled into this war by Israel multiple times, and multiple occasions, even during its own civil wars. So again, it's a very complex situation. And I don't think blaming one side or the other would resolve the situation. I would maybe say just being realistic about it. I won't be blaming Israel, but we can obviously say that Israel is attempting ethnic cleansing over here. It does have the higher ground and the military capabilities of actually conquering or maybe forming a Pax Judaica, a large sphere of influence that is led by Israel as the most powerful state in the Middle East. It can do that now, and it might actually do this. However, is it attempting also ethnic cleansing simultaneously while attempting to construct these specific foreign policy goals? Yes, yeah, they are. They are attempting a form of ethnic cleansing, and it's quite tragic. They've led to a human catastrophe in Gaza.
Last question, Doctor. You mentioned that there is an existential threat in the Middle East. While I was doing research about Israel and Gaza, I found out that some far-right Israeli politicians and also far-right Israeli citizens wants to expand Israel beyond the borders of West Bank and Gaza. They want to expand in Lebanon, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Egypt and Kuwait. Some of the Israeli military even wore that map on their uniform. Do you think Israel is a threat to Middle East, to the security of Middle East and to the security of the global society?
So the Greater Israel Project is a well-known project. It's been spoken of, again, in many different spheres by historians, by theologians, by even conspiracy theories. It's big over there in that specific these specific circles. However, I'll say one thing. So is Israel as a state and specific political parties and political groups and individuals within Israel are a threat to the Middle East and are a threat to global politics to a degree. Specific lobbies, I would say, within that are Israeli and functioning within specific countries around the world are a threat to global politics and are a threat to the Middle East. However, it's not the Israeli people per se. It's Israel as a country, not Israel as a people, and that's what I want to maybe highlight. This is one thing. Maybe I'll just say this briefly, but I mean, Judaism or the Jewish people, the Hebrew people, played a big role and play a big role within major Abrahamic religions. Whether it's Islam or whether it's Christianity, they emerged from the seeds of Judaism at one point. There are prophets that are important to Judaism and to the Jewish people that are also important to the Muslims and the Christians. A lot of Westerners speak of Judeo-Christian values nowadays. So it's, again, I think we have to be, one thing is this specific situation with Gaza has led to a chaotic form of hysteria globally, where I think we need to use our words carefully, and we need to maybe ask questions that could fix the complexity of such situations that we're in. So maybe one thing I would say is as a state, Israel as a state is definitely a threat to peace in the Middle East. And but even then, there are other forces at play, other irrational forces at play in the Middle East, that despite whether Israel is there or not, the Middle East already suffers from a disorder, as I mentioned earlier, that is maybe not even linked to Israel specifically and only, but it's also maybe linked to French and British colonialism and what that has brought about and what that has instilled within the people for centuries. Because these things don't go away instantly. We take this for granted. We need historical awareness. We need to realize the continuity between the past and the present and the future. There is no disconnection. Everything is connected, and things lead to another. Now, the Great Israel Project, are they attempting to do this now? To a degree, they're expanding. We see them now disrespecting the sovereignty of Syria and calling for a full demilitarization of Al-Suwaid region, which is the Druzi minority. So it's a Druzi majority region in southern Syria. They still hold parts of Lebanon. They will possibly take Gaza and possibly maybe get into increased tensions with Egypt, God knows now, or maybe even threaten the sovereignty of Jordan, which is very normal for Israel. Now, is it going to expand realistically to that specific map? I think it's an aspiration by many specific religious groups in Israel, but I don't think it's logical from military and logistical perspectives. In my opinion, I don't think, maybe that's the end goal by specific groups and circles, but I don't think it's a logical one, and I don't think the Israeli military is irrational enough to actually attempt such a, even though it's an expansionist state nevertheless, but not such a map. And it's a well-known map, the Greater Israel Project. You can Google it and you can see that. And it's quite non-realistic in terms of logistical and military points. It's quite unrealistic.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for that in-depth
Thank you so much.
analysis. And I hope you'll be joining us next time.
Definitely.
Yes, thank you so much also, correspondent Abdi Hamid Ali for your time to join us in this bulletin. And with that, we conclude our bulletin. Remember, here the Ambassador we debunk global diplomacy and geopolitics. I have been your Ambassador Susan Nganga. Have a good afternoon.